Okay, we're going to get started. My name is Jeff Anderson. To my right is Pat Wall, W-A-L-L. Pat Wall is a former priest. He is former priest and monk at St. John's. He now works with our firm, Jeff Anderson and Associates, as an investigator and as an advocate for the survivors. To our right is also a courageous survivor, Paul Hotchkiss. Paul had the opportunity to remain anonymous and as a John Doe, but he's chosen to be here and stand with us today on behalf of himself and all the other survivors with whom we speak today. The spelling of his last name is Hotchkiss, and he's here to speak to what it feels like to do something now, today, about what happened 35 years ago that he couldn't do something about then, and nobody else would. I'd like to start by saying that today marks a new day of exposure and forced transparency. The release of the 13 files and the 14 offenders that had not been seen before, at least by the public with the exception of Adamson, is really an opportunity to alert the community and all the communities in the Diocese of Winona of the past perils and the conscious choices made by top officials to protect the reputation of the diocese, to protect the reputation of the offenders, to avoid scandal. And in each of the files that we have released and now posted on our website as we speak at andersonadvocates.com, there is a pattern demonstrated. And that pattern demonstrated in each of those files, some 17,000 pages I might add, that have been called down, demonstrate that each bishop and each top official from 1950 to the present made conscious choices to conceal the crimes against the children and to protect the offenders and each of them. And of these offenders whose files are released, 14 in number today, 9 are dead. 9 are dead. But the legacy and the consequences of their conduct is evergreen, and it lives today in the hearts and the souls, the psyches and the family lives of all those survivors who were left behind, and most of whom were never given a chance to take action or do anything for fear of being believed or for reasons of their own shame or secrecy. The Child Victims Act, passed by the Minnesota legislature this year, has given survivors a chance to take action. Some of those survivors are in this room, and all of those survivors we speak on behalf of. And that action began with the first case brought against the Diocese of Winona and the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, on behalf of John Doe 1. That case is going to trial November 3rd of this year. And in that case, the judge ordered the files to be released of each of these offenders and others who have been accused of offenses. And there are 8 other offenders who have been accused whose files are yet to be released. And we'll be working on that another day for you when we go through a process. But the good news is that these files are out today. The bad news is that each of them reflect the same pattern. A pattern of concealment, a pattern of deceit, a pattern of conscious choices made by top officials to protect themselves and their reputation and to avoid scandal. And in every file that you see or review on our website, or choose to look at, should you do, you'll see that the only time they ever really did anything to remove Adamson or Cashman or Smith or Krogh or take any action to take them out of ministry or to take them out of the priesthood was in response to pressure. The fact that we were going to sue, or the fact because a survivor had sued, or the fact that the Child Victims Act had passed. And in every instance, otherwise, this was all kept secret. It was all kept in the files of the Diocese of Winona. It was all kept under the control of the top leaders and the bishops in the Diocese of Winona, at the peril of so many children. And so the good news is that some of this information is out there. The bad news is there's much more to be disclosed. And the harm that has been done to so many survivors can't be undone. But the survivor with whom we stand today, and on the shoulders of John Doe and all the other survivors with whom we work, we want you to know that you have done something by being a part of this journey to do something to protect other kids, by helping us reveal the past so it's not repeated in the future. So you survivors that are in this audience today and watching on TV or listening to the radio or reading the news, know that you have done something to help us, help those kids whose names will never have to be known because of releases like this today. And to the survivors, we are deeply grateful to your courage. We are deeply grateful for your courage. We're deeply grateful for your will in taking some action and allowing us to stand with you, both in spirit and in common purpose, united to do what we can every day for the future to protect kids against the horrors that each of you had to endure and have endured by reason of the conscious choices made by top officials in the Diocese of Winona. You survivors, thank you to this legislature for passing the Child Victims Act, and to the governor for signing it into law. Thank you. You've now given survivors and us as advocates a chance to expose the painful past and the records that reflect the painful past and the choices made by top officials, and it makes that less likely to be repeated in the future. And so we are hopeful for a safer future by reason of the courage of so many with whom we speak today. With that in mind, I'll turn over to Pat Wall, and then we'll hear from Paul.
Father Mann and Father Coletti and Father Schmitz taught us years ago to know what we need to say and say it pretty shortly. I have three things, basically. First and most important is that there are many survivors who can't be here. They're reflected in the records because in the horror of their child abuse by a priest of the diocese, they committed suicide. And we have to remember that they're not here, but they are not forgotten. Second of all, I think it's most important to understand, as far as you look at all the data, this is overwhelming data when you get thousands and thousands of pages coming at you.
And right here, when Pat refers to the data, these are the binders of the 14 files that have been called through of the 17,000 pages that were required to be produced. These are the files themselves in hard copy form that we put in binders to demonstrate this is a small portion of the pattern demonstrated of concealment, conscious choices made to protect reputation at the peril of many. And that's what these are.
And the reason this is important, this is not just a dusty book type of operation. History is prophecy. If Father Fabian taught us anything years ago in the seminary, history is prophecy. If we do not learn from history, if we do not change our ways, we will repeat the same tragedies of before. So our hope is that we take these lessons, that we apply them now, and then we apply them into the future. So one of the non-monetary things that we're asking for everywhere is simply that we remove the clerics from the investigations of child sexual abuse, so that the sexual abuse team of the diocese is not made up of the bishop, of the vicar general, of the canon lawyer in the tribunal, and of the civil lawyer who's hired internally and commanded and controlled by the bishop. That this really needs to be removed from the diocese in order to actually change anything. The last thing I wanted to say is, and something that needs to be absolutely remembered, is that when Father Hatch was sent to the servants of the Paraclete, and he attempted to join the servants of the Paraclete, Father Gerald Fitzgerald at that time said something very important. Let the dead bury the dead. That is the philosophy that the church operated under for all those years. Let the dead bury the dead. In other words, don't call the police, don't tell civil authorities, don't tell the local parish, don't even tell the pastor who's supposedly supervising the younger priest. That's what must stop. We can't have that any longer. Otherwise, we're going to have the same tragedy repeat itself. And I don't want this to be an exercise in futility and rolling the rock up the hill. This really is about the future protection of children in our entire society, not just the church, not just the Boy Scouts, in our entire society, so that kids are first. Not survivors are first. Kids are first, so that our children are taken care of in all of our schools, public or private, doesn't matter. That is the biggest thing that I hope that we can learn from this whole process. We cannot follow through what Father Fitzgerald was telling the Bishop of Winona, to let the dead bury the dead. That must stop now.
I'm going to, Paul, I want you to step up here for a moment and identify yourself and then express what it is that drew you to this moment in time and to stand with us today.
Hi, my name is Paul Hotchkiss. I was sexually assaulted from Adamson. I had him arrested. The case disappeared. Gone. This has to stop today. No more children can be hurt. It's a horrible thing, and it needs to stop, and now. I don't know what else to say. It's got to be over. These people can't be allowed to do this over and over. They're monsters. I have children, and it'd be a horrible thing for it to happen to them.
Paul was one of dozens of innocent kids abused by Adamson, a known offender, well known to us. Reported to the police, report written, report suppressed, top officials kept it secret, and Adamson continued in ministry until we sued him in 1983. And that pattern is demonstrated in these other 13 files. As an example, in the case of Joseph Cashman, he remained in ministry and was allowed to remain in ministry with knowledge of top officials that he had offended. And only in 2014, you'll see in the records, does the bishop write, because of recent legislation that is developing, the Child Victims Act, we're going to have to do something with Cashman. And they made a decision to start the process of removing him from the priesthood. And it's that kind of secrecy, that kind of self-protection that caused Paul and countless others to suffer some who are still with us, some stand with us in spirit today, and many have come to work with us. The suit that brought this information forward, brought by John Doe 1, is brought in public nuisance. And it seeks not monetary damages first, but it seeks to disclose and disgorge and require the Diocese of Winona and the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis to come forth with all these files, which they now have been ordered to do, to turn them over to our office. The Diocese of Winona has turned over 17,000 pages. The Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis has turned over 45,000, I think it's closer to 50,000 pages, Stacy. Over 50,000 pages of files. And it is those files that we have been reviewing, that we're now making portions public to show a long-standing pattern, conscious choices made by top officials. And when Paul calls his offender a monster, he has every right to call that offender a monster for what that person did to him as a priest. But the real problem is not the individual offenders that offend. The problem remains and has always been the conscious choices made by top officials to protect those offenders and give them renewed access to other kids so they could offend and reoffend. And so what these files reflect is conscious choices made by bishops and top officials in the Diocese of Winona to allow each of these men to continue in ministry where they were in parishes, in schools, after reports had been made, and after they'd been sent to treatment, and after they'd been recycled back into ministry. And that's what's most disturbing about these files, and most alarming about these practices employed by top officials for decades. And so to John Doe, who brought this case, and to all the survivors with whom we speak and stand here today, and to Paul, we are extremely grateful, because it is your courage that is causing the painful truth, as sad as it is, to be known, which makes it less likely to be repeated in the future, and less likely for other kids to be hurt and wounded the way you are. When Pat Wall opened his remarks, he said, indeed, there are many who were abused by these offenders and many others who are no longer with us. They took their own lives, or they mired themselves in addiction and self-destruction, men and women. Michael Keesley, for example, this offender right here, the records reflect one report that one girl reported to the bishop that there were at least 6 other girls in a group of 14 that she knows he abused. And what was done? Keesley moved him so he could have access to other girls, where he continued that kind of offense, as far as we can tell, and that was kept secret. So it is boys and girls, it is men and women who have had to suffer in secrecy by reason of the choices to keep these crimes by kept secret and to protect the reputation of the diocese. And so with that in mind, I will open it up to questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you speak to the bishop now, Bishop Quinn, I'm talking about specifically, he is adamant that this diocese specifically has, since the John Jay study in 2004, every time they've heard any complaint, right away to the police they go. What is your response to that?
Well, to the bishop's assertion that they report to the police, at this point in time, I think they do. I think they are reporting to the police. And I think they have been taught the lesson that if they don't, we're coming at them. And right now, I have not received information that they have not reported to police. In the case of Coppola, I think there was cooperation from the diocese. We got him and took his deposition before he got extradited back to India. And so I have some confidence that the bishop is reporting to the police and his top officials. But I don't have confidence that they have come fully clean. And that's what this is about, getting fully clean. For example, if they were really wanting to do the right thing, it's a lot more than reporting to the police. Why is it the file of Joseph Cashman says, and in their internal memorandum, recent legislation and developments under the Child Victims Act in 2014 is going to cause us to do something? 2014? Excuse me? The Cashman stuff shows it goes back 20 years. So just saying that they're reporting to the police and actually reporting to the police is not enough. They have to come clean with all these secrets about all these crimes and all these offenders, not just these, but all the other ones that are in their files that we're working on right now. And they not only have to pledge to have policies and protocols, but they have to implement those things. And they have to turn the decision-making over to law enforcement, to professionals trained in the investigation of sexual abuse, and not handle it internally. And as long as they handle these issues internally, these problems persist and problems remain and the peril remains real. And until they turn it over to the professionals and take it out of their own hands and adhere to secrecy and their own protocols, the problem persists. Yes, sir.
Now, when you release these in full, is there any fear of backlash from the graphic details for any survivors or seeing what's
the question is very good. In releasing these files, is there concern about the identities or the information from the survivors or backlash from the survivors? We have been scrupulous for the last 3 months. We've had 10 people reviewing these files to take out any survivor identifying information. So there's nothing in these files that are being released today that compromises the privacy, the dignity, or the identity of any of the survivors. This is only about the practices of the top officials and the offender's conduct. And we've been scrupulous about that, and that's why it's taken us some months to do that. And we've been vigilant about that too. Our goal is to protect survivors first. Our goal is to make sure we help survivors protect other kids second. And our goal is to make sure no further harm is done to those families that have been harmed. And the release of these files will not do that. When survivors read these files, they will be upset. And there are some very painful truths in these files. And there's some very sorrowful things and decisions made for some very wrong reasons. But from that pain and sorrow and knowing the past is our great hope, and there's great promise that there's a safer tomorrow and a better today. And each of the survivors can know that they're a part of this journey of bringing hope, help, and healing to those that have been wounded and those that won't be because of actions like today.
Another question, John. In the files, I would imagine that not only the bishops, but some of the other top clerics are named, folks who are vicar generals, those kind of folks, who are still active in the church and in their positions. What do you expect the reaction to be to their non-action?
Well, the question is in these files, there's clearly not only the actions and the choices made by the bishops, but top officials, from the vicar generals to the chancellors, and their names are in there. And what do we expect their reaction to be? Well, the reaction to any disclosures that have been made in the past has always been denial, has always been deceit, and has always been to deflect. And if past is prologue, that's what they will continue to do. They will also continue to make promises that they are getting better and doing better because they have new policies. And we believe that that is a promise that needs to be made, but just simply promising new policies and promising to do better does not protect kids. The only thing that protects kids is making sure all the top officials that have not done it are exposed, and they are required, under strict scrutiny of law, to make sure they don't repeat the mistakes in the future that they've made in the past. And until we're satisfied all those that have made those mistakes and those choices in the past are revealed through these fields and files and others, we're not satisfied that the work is done.
I had a question for Paul. What made you feel like you need to be here today?
Why do I need to be here? Because this needs to stop. It's been covered up since it happened to me. He was arrested and was covered up afterward, and it continued to go. It needs to stop. End. Over. No more children need to be heard. That's why I'm here.
I was going to ask you, sorry, this is a tough question, but what was kind of most challenging in coming forward to the media today and in your choice to make that decision to kind of express your own concern with that?
Why?
What's so hard and challenging in coming forward and sharing this?
What's so hard? My hurt, my shame. What happened to me?
Paul, can I ask when that was, when your abuse was?
Mid-70s?
And was that here in Rochester?
Excuse me?
Was that here in Rochester?
No.
I walked out the back door. I was just here to back up Paul, because it was the same fucking son of a bitch and fucking did the same to me. Ugh. A lot of anger involved.
There's a lot of hurt involved, and a lot of there's anger in what they did. He went and abused children after me, and continued when I had him arrested for it.
What has the church's response been to you?
To me, nothing.
And the question is, what has the church's response been? And to Paul, it's largely been deflect, deny, minimize, and blame. And the Diocese of Winona, in this case, this John Doe 1 case, and those that persisted before, some of which we had to bring to trial, and the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, in this nuisance case, in this negligence case, and the cases that we have brought so far, have denied legal responsibility, have deflected, and have tried to blame the others, and their position has been denial, minimization, and blame. We expect more. The survivors deserve more. And as this trial approaches, where we intend to bring into evidence before Judge Vandenorth the scope of the public nuisance, that is the hazard that persists both past and present, present these files and the evidence and the testimony of others to show that the peril remains. We're inviting this bishop and the archbishop and all the top officials to engage with us, not against us, to engage with the survivors, not against them, to help us and them have a better future for those that have been hurt and do a better job of protecting other kids. We would like nothing more to work with them.
How's that going?
Well, we've got a trial coming up November 2nd. What does that tell you? But we don't lose hope, and we don't give up. And we believe they want the same thing. We just don't believe they know how to get it. And we believe they need outside resources. They need survivors to come forward and continue coming forward to put heat and light on them. And through that heat and that light, change is underway, and I'm seeing change. It's just not coming fast enough, and I have not seen the denial break, at least to this day. But as we move forward, I always have hope, and there's always promise for a better tomorrow, and that's why we're here today.